Welcome back and thanks for staying with us on KUTV Primetime News. Remember, you can share thoughts with us on our social media platforms on Facebook, KUTV Kenya, and on Twitter, KUTV_Kenya. Now, do you ever wonder about your blood pressure level? Well, you should, because the number one contributing risk factor for global death is raised blood pressure, causing strokes, heart attacks, and other cardiovascular complications. Tonight, we're joined by a health specialist, Kevin Oduor, who sums up as the Chief Program Officer for Starlink INC, to shed more light on the May Measurement Month 2021 run by the International Society of Hypertension. So, Oduor Kelvin.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for dedicating your time for this discussion.
Thank you for having me too again to talk about this disease.
Right. Now, dive right into the discussion of the night. We are talking about hypertension. Probably many people don't know about this hypertension, which is classified as one of the NCDs. You could probably start with shedding some light on this. What is it about that you want to talk about in our discussion tonight?
Okay, well, you have rightly mentioned a lot of people do not know about hypertension, and I want to kindly shed more light on this disease. Of course, I have to mention that it's a disease of public health importance, and it's classified as one of the cardiovascular diseases. And so, hypertension generally, let me start with let me use the layman language, blood pressure or high blood pressure, because again, that is the term that maybe will resonate with our dear viewers. So blood pressure generally is the force that is exerted against, the artery walls. And it's the force of the blood, that is. And so when your blood pressure is high, of course, we talk about there's a range. Normal blood pressure usually should be 120/80. Of course, you can't have a perfect blood pressure like it's 120/80. There's a range. So from 120 to 140 for the systolic pressure. That is how your heart maybe contracts and beat. For diastolic, because hypertension or blood pressure is a fraction, is a set of two numbers. That is the systolic and the diastolic. So these two form your blood pressure. And so when your systolic is between 120 to 140, that's a normal blood pressure. But when it is between 150 to 180, it's considered high and it's in the borderline. Above 180, that is now a serious one. For the diastolic pressure, it has to be 90 and below, but not below 60. And so if it's below 60, then that also causes alarm.
Right.
And so there are a lot of things that, go into this, and people are not really aware of what blood pressure or high blood pressure could cause them. Of course, there are a lot of complications, and you mentioned some, and I think these are things that we'll talk about into our discussion.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, thank you for that. So we are talking about the May Measurement Month, which is mostly carried out in May, the month of May. So you could probably shed some light on this and tell us why are we having it in November, and what is of essence of having this May Measurement Month as well.
Oh, okay, well, you of course mentioned when you were starting this discussion that May Measurement Month is being run by International Society of Hypertension, or the ISH. And May Measurement Month was started generally just to make people aware or raise awareness on the need for them to have their blood pressure checked. And so it usually takes place in the month of May, from May 1st to May 30th. But due to COVID-19, then that couldn't happen in 2020. It didn't happen in 2020, but now it's happening in 2021. But it also couldn't happen during the month of May. And so due to these complications, arising from COVID-19, there was a need to now extend it so it could start from May all the way to November. And it's ending in the month, or this month, on 30th. And we are glad as an organization to be participating in this. Of course, the International Hypertension Society, or Society of Hypertension, works with the local organizations, mostly the Kenya Cardiac Society. Now, Kenya Cardiac Society now works also with the local organization, like now Starlink, which is an organization, to measure or have people check their blood pressure, and this is happening all over the country.
Right.
And over 80 countries are participating in this exercise. And so for us as international volunteers, we are volunteering, having people know their blood pressure, and it's a month for us now to be aware of how blood pressure or high blood pressure can lead to a lot of other complications.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, still talking about the hypertension, the high blood pressure, it has been classified as a global pandemic, as a global problem. So that people may really resonate and get to know about this disease, what are the glaring statistics that you could tell us about this disease locally and probably also internationally?
Well, let me maybe start with the local statistics. In Kenya, there are a lot of studies that have been done concerning hypertension, and the prevalence of hypertension right now in Kenya stands around 24%. Of course, it's an estimate. If you look at maybe what has been done, studies that have been done recently in 2019 indicates that the prevalence of hypertension in sub-Saharan Africa is 30%. Of course, if I talk about when I talk about sub-Saharan Africa, I mean those countries. I'm excluding countries that are not are playing in the Arab League of Nations. So those that are playing in the Arab League of Nations are not included here. Countries like Egypt or Tunisia, those countries in the north. But in Africa itself, now including those countries playing in the Arab League of Nations, the prevalence of hypertension stands at 31%. That is also an estimate. But WHO has done also a comprehensive report on the same, and has concluded that the prevalence rate of hypertension in Africa is at 27%. So it's not a big variance from what has been done by other original studies. But if you look at worldwide, around 1.2 billion or 2.8 billion people are also between the age of 30 to 79 are also living with hypertension. But what is also again shocking is that half of those who are living with hypertension, then they don't know that they have hypertension. And one thing also I have to also talk about is what you mentioned. Of course, it's the number one global contributing risk factor to global deaths. Of course, causing these things like stroke and those other cardiovascular diseases. So it's glaring statistics, as you mentioned. A lot of people are living this disease and with this hypertension, and sadly, 46%. Of course, I've talked about half do not know, half know that they are living with hypertension.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, it is also very shocking from the statistics that there are a number of people living ideally, but they have no idea that they're having these problems of hypertension. And that calls for more awareness to be done on this sector, that people get to know about this disease and what they really need to know and to do about the disease as well. So I want us to talk about the misconceptions that are going around concerning hypertension. There are a lot of myths, of course, surrounding the hypertension, of course. So, as a medic, what could you probably highlight? What are the causes of high blood pressure, which is also termed as hypertension?
I will talk about causes, but I want to refer to them as risk factors.
Risk factors, yes.
And so, I mean, just like any other NCD, the causes or the risk factors are the same. We'll talk about, for hypertension is a bit different because the risk factors are some modifiable risk factors. We also have non-modifiable risk factors. So let me shed more light on modifiable risk factors. Mostly it's around lifestyle and healthy diets. People maybe consuming food that is high in salt, or there are a lot of salt. And this one raises your blood pressure, and that's why when you come for screening, we tell you to reduce your salt intake. And also these trans fats that we have, the saturated fats, are also a risk factor to this hypertension. We have also modifiable risk factors like not taking enough fruits, people are not taking vegetables, or people just want to take meat, these animal protein. which are also a risk factor, because this is something that we talk about when you come for screening and your blood pressure is raised. We talk about this and tell you, hey, you have to reduce. Of course, it has also an issue to do with alcohol intake. Also alcohol, we know drugs and tobacco, mostly alcohol and tobacco, which are among the risk factors for all these major types of NCDs. Whether you have the 4 major types of NCDs. Of course, there are also non-modifiable risk factors, and we have things like family. If you are coming from a family or a generation that has had, cases of high blood pressure, then probably you will also be predisposed, and you'll also be presenting with episodes of high blood pressure.
Right.
So those are non-modifiable, and also age also. We have seen this, and we have been talking about the aged, and also those who are living with the underlying conditions, or somebody may be presenting with diabetes, or somebody has, let's say, kidney disease, and so that is a risk factor to hypertension.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, talking about these risk factors, we are seeing in Makueni County, there is the 7th Devolution Conference. They have been talking about, of course, climate change. It was also there in the COP26 summit. So can we also attribute the climatic actions to some of the risk factors for hypertension?
Yeah, well, we can attribute, and air pollution is also one of the risk factors for NCDs. Remember, we are talking about right now. There's a campaign which is gaining momentum on the link between climate and also NCDs, and we are glad that even as Towerlink, we already have a project that is set to begin on the same. So air pollution and let me say climatic conditions are also a risk factor to hypertension, and because they will expose you to other diseases, and those diseases may be diabetes or even maybe kidney disease, then that will be a risk factor now to hypertension. So there's a link between climatic conditions or even this air pollution,
right,
and hypertension.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, talking about hypertension, we know hypertension is also a risk factors to other affiliate diseases. So maybe you could also highlight to us what are some of the diseases which are which come as a result of high blood pressure.
Yeah, well, I think this might have come a bit in our discussion, but I'm going to again highlight maybe in detail. There are quite a number of complications that are as a result of hypertension or high blood pressure, and one of these is stroke. We know how stroke happens because it starts from your brain, and the blockage of maybe supply of blood is not, you're not able to maybe receive enough blood in your brain. And so that is as a result of high blood pressure. And stroke is one of them. We have also heart failure. There can also, heart failure generally is when the blood cannot reach your vital organs. And so it means that your heart might not also pump the blood to those vital organs. And we also have what do we call this? Heartbeat can also change. You can be also having a very high pulse rate as a result of hypertension. And that's why when we are doing this blood pressure screening, we talk about also pulse rate, and we check your pulse rate if it is consistent with your systolic and the diastolic pressure. And so heartbeat can also result into sudden death. If it's irregular, it can also result into sudden death. And the heartbeat should not be something lower than 40. And if that is experienced, then it can cause sudden death. And that's why you can experience heart failure. There's also heart diseases you can also get. Because hypertension is classified under cardiovascular, and it's a risk factor to all those cardiovascular diseases.
Right. Now, I think what is mostly on the public domain when it comes to hypertension, people know mostly about the high blood pressure. So can we probably divulge to the blood pressure when it is lower, to lower than the number you quoted? Was it 60 or something?
Yeah, it's 120/80.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, so when it is low, what are some of the dangers involved when your blood pressure is so low than the standard required level?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting discussion when you talk about low blood pressure, because there are a lot of commentaries out here, people talking about, low blood pressure is desirable because it's low, and so we have been talking about high blood pressure to be the major concern here. But low blood pressure should also be a concern because it can also be life-threatening. While sometimes it doesn't cause a lot of, it doesn't cause alarm, but it can also be life-threatening. And remember, if your blood pressure is too low, then that can mean that blood is not going to be supplied to those vital organs. And so I'd mentioned a low blood pressure would be something below 90 for the systolic pressure and below 60 for the diastolic. So if you have something below that, then that is low blood pressure. And it's something that while we say it should not concern you that much, but it is something that is below 50 and very critical, like 50 for systolic, then it should be something that should now concern you, and it's life-threatening, and so should be looked at, and it should be addressed. And low blood pressure can present in many ways. It can present in terms of fatigue. You can also feel dizzy. You can also cause blurred vision, and you're not able to see well. And so it has also its implications or complications, but it is not as high as that high blood pressure. Right. But it should also be a concern because it can be life-threatening.
Right.
It can also be treated and optimized. Yeah.
Now, we are talking about hypertension, and it has always been in the public domain, this phrase that prevention is better than cure. So we are talking about hypertension. So what are probably, how can someone try to mitigate these problems of high blood pressure, and probably how can they maintain their pressures to the normal range to prevent this disease of high blood pressure?
Yeah, high blood pressure, it's easy to prevent. Remember, we were talking about NCDs, they are preventable. And the things that you can also manage. And remember, most NCDs, some cannot be treated, but some can be treated. But mostly with prevention mechanism in place, we can address these diseases. But for hypertension, it requires lifestyle, and it's what we normally talk about when somebody comes for blood pressure checkup. We tell them, hey, don't take a lot of salt, regulate. We tell them, hey, avoid taking drugs. If there are people, that's why when we are also doing this thing, we also take, we record if somebody is taking drug or taking alcohol, even tobacco. So we talk about maybe stop using drugs, stop using alcohol and tobacco. We also talk about things, don't take too much of animal protein. And we also you should avoid these fats, these saturated fats, and we also call them trans fat. So those are things that you should look at when you want to prevent. Of course, there's also management for those who already have. There's also management. So what you do is you can take drugs, the drugs for the same. You can also try to reduce stress, because stress is also considered as one of the contributing factors towards hypertension. So I think those are the things that you need to do. There are things that are basic and not really clinical. Yeah.
Right. Now, so as we're talking still about hypertension, as a country, where do you think are we with the policies that are supposed to govern the health sector and probably on these NCDs? Where are we, and where are you seeing there are some deficit where the country needs to work on so that the prevalence of hypertension in the country can be something that is manageable?
When we talk about policy, something that attracts a lot of interest. there's something that we talked about this even yesterday during our stakeholder meeting with the Ministry of Health, and something interesting that came up is that when you're trying to address policy gaps, and sometimes you will go against the efforts to address these policy gaps, go against some business interests of very powerful economic operators. And so you'll find that things like addressing the physical planning, how do we plan our roads, our cities, do they have walkways? Those are things that need to be anchored in our policies. And if you find a gap, and addressing that gap can also result into possible, let me say, legal contestations. And people are saying, hey, while we are trying to address this, then this is going to be an economic burden to us. So there's a gap there, and it requires us to just be objective in terms of addressing these gaps. And also, if you look at in terms of our roads having walkways, the problem is if you look at Thika Road, it has the walkways, but there's a lot of encroachment, a lot of shops coming up and encroaching, and now people cannot walk to their places of work. So I think that is also a place that should be addressed, and should be a strong enforcement of the policy. There's no encroachment on the roads, and people can also walk and maybe do exercise along these roads. And that's a policy gap that need to be addressed.
Right. Now, even as we winding up this discussion, I do want you to tell the general public, even as we are creating the awareness about hypertension, where are some of the sources where they can get to read about this, they can get exact information about the hypertension, and probably for them that are having some of the complications that comes with hypertension, where can you pinpoint them to find immediate solution to the problems?
Well, if you talk about sources, maybe literature, then most of us, we refer to WHO, that is the World Health Organization, because it's the organization that gives direction or recommendations in terms of all these diseases. So one, I will direct them to WHO or the World Health Organization. I will also direct them to the Global NCD Alliance. We have the Global NCD Alliance. We have the NCD Alliance of Kenya, which for us as Toylink we subscribe to. So there are a lot of organizations, and but credible ones. We'll talk about the WHO. We'll talk about the NCD Alliance, the global one. There's also the NCD Alliance of Kenya. There's also the NCD Alliance East Africa. So that's where you can refer if you're looking for these sources or literature. But there are also very many studies that have been done, original studies or maybe meta-analysis, and there are a lot of literature, and they can refer them there.
Right. Now, you hinted to us at some point that there are projects that you are probably having on Starlink that you'd want to bring on board concerning these NCDs. Kindly keep us posted on that. Now, as we wind up in about 2 minutes, what could be your final words to the general public? What do they need to know about hypertension, and probably your words of advice to the lifestyle?
Since it's the month or it's the May measurement month, I think my clarion call will be to ask people to roll their sleeves and have the blood pressure checked. Of course, this year's theme, the May measurement month, the theme is roll your sleeves and save life, and you are on. So it's high time that we roll our sleeves, save lives, and it's our own life that we're trying to save. And so let's go out there, have our blood pressure checked, and get solution. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for that, Daktari. We hope to have you here again and again, because health is wealth.
Yeah, sure.
And we need the country, even as we are moving economically to a stabilization, we also need to, stabilize our health so that we become all-round wealthy. Right. Thank you so much for your time. Hope to see you again.
Thank you.
All right. Now, with that, we are taking another very short break here. We still have much for you, so keep it KUTV. See you on the other side.